You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button.
Wilson, we appreciate the time as always. How are you?
I'm doing well, Matt. Happy Mardi Gras.
Happy Mardi Gras, man. Yeah, I've spent it, in downtown Baton Rouge in an office all day. But yeah, happy Mardi Gras. It's always a great time of year, and it's carnival season never disappoints. So happy Mardi Gras. It also was a very newsy day surrounding LSU football. Brian Polian, of course, and then MALIK Nabers. I want to start with Nabers. Obviously, the arrest last night in New Orleans on a weapons charge. LSU still has not released an official statement on the matter. Is there anything that you can update us on, Wilson, regarding MALIK Nabers?
Yes, he was on, according to police documents that we obtained, he was on Bourbon Street when police noticed an L-shaped object in his pocket. They asked him, he had obviously that was identified as a gun. They asked if he had a permit, and said that he did not. So they took him, arrested him, and he was booked on an illegal weapons charge. This is a misdemeanor, and he was scheduled to appear in court today at 3 p.m. in New Orleans. And that's the extent of what we know about the situation right now. It doesn't sound like it was maybe serious, of course, being as a misdemeanor. And so we don't have anything else yet from LSU about the situation.
We'll wait further comment from LSU, but for what it's worth, also MALIK Nabers released on his own recognizance this morning from prison, appeared in court, as you heard from Will, or was scheduled to appear in court there, as you heard from Wilson Alexander. Will keep you updated as that situation goes further. Wilson, when I originally reached out to you before that news officially broke, it was about Brian Polian and him moving into an off-the-field role, kind of more of a GM role, as opposed to special teams coordinator. Just first, before we get into what that role is and where LSU goes from here, your overall reaction to the decision to demote Brian Polian.
It doesn't really come as a surprise. There had been sort of rumblings about this. Certainly fan interest had been on this topic really ever since last season, wondering if Brian Kelly would make some kind of a change because of what we saw out of LSU special teams last year, muff punts, coverage units that weren't very good. Of course, depth issues on the roster maybe contributed to that in some way, but just the execution wasn't at a level that LSU would expect to have. And so to make some kind of change wasn't a surprise, especially to do it in this way, because Brian Polian has also been very influential in the rebuilding of this roster. And now he gets to really do that full time. His sole focus will be on things like NIL and the transfer portal and recruiting and just daily operations in the program, helping Brian Kelly, because they are quite close, as people know. They were together for 5 years at Notre Dame. He was the only Notre Dame assistant to come with him to LSU. And so now he'll do a lot more of that stuff on a full-time basis.
Is this kind of a similar role to what Austin Thomas did at LSU?
In some ways, yes, as I understand it. I'll be interested to hear once we can, ask Brian Kelly more about it, what he says, because he was familiar with what Austin Thomas did at LSU, but there's a little bit more in play these days. NIL was still in the first, I guess, within the first year or so of having NIL when Austin was there. The transfer portal wasn't quite as active, although it was certainly getting much bigger. But you didn't have the pre-designed windows and that kind of thing. So I think in a lot of ways it's easy to think of it in a similar role, but there's a little bit more to it maybe these days in terms of what goes into being a general manager now, just because there are so many things that someone in that position would have to think about because of what we have in college football.
So it's obviously early in the process here. I mean, the news just coming down today. LSU just announcing it strategically on Mardi Gras Day, slipping it in there. Wilson Alexander for The Advocate is our guest on Twitter at WHAlexander_. Wilson, again, I know it's early. Is there any names potentially that you're hearing, though, as possible replacements for Brian Polian on staff?
I haven't heard any names yet, unfortunately. I don't have any there for you yet.
Well, that's okay. I have something else. Recruiting coordinator. Brian Polian also doubled as that. What do they do with that position on staff? Is that something they just promote within?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting because Brian Polian will still be heavily involved. We might not see somebody with a straight-up recruiting coordinator title now. I'm not exactly sure because he's still going to be involved in a lot of the stuff that goes into building the roster, including recruiting and just identifying needs across the board, and then how they disperse that throughout the roster with their big recruiting department. And there's so many people that are in part of that operation with Will Redmond, J.R. Belton, and Sherman Wilson, and Jordan Arsaman, people, who are part of that whole just recruiting, machine of sorts. That I'm not sure if they're going to have just a separate recruiting coordinator, because Polian will still be involved in that. Frank Wilson has always been a big piece of that as well, with all of his ties and connections and just institutional knowledge of Louisiana. So they might not have to just hire another recruiting coordinator, or at least somebody with that title, because there's so many people that it's already sort of set up to run without one maybe person having that name.
Moving one guy, it can change so much on staff. It really is crazy. Wilson, I kind of want to talk a little bit just about the team in general as well. I mean, they're going to open up spring practice on March the 9th, and one thing that's going to be interesting, at least on the offensive side of the ball, will be quarterback. Jaden Daniels, great year last year, is receiving recognition already heading into the 2023 season. You did kind of see a bit of a two-quarterback system, and Brian Kelly, after the Citrus Bowl, when asked about quarterback controversy, said there is none. Jaden's the starter, but then really kind of awkwardly left the door open about, well, you can't be closed-minded when you have two really good quarterbacks. What exactly do you expect to see from that competition when they do take the field for the first time on March 9th for spring?
It's going to be fascinating how much Garrett Nussmeier can really push for this spot, or push for a two-quarterback system. And it probably comes down to, in many ways, what Garrett Nussmeier shows, again, here heading into his second full spring with this staff, third season in college football. We saw these flashes in the postseason. How much can he really push for a spot here? Because Jaden Daniels is, the returning starter, as Brian Kelly said. He's expected to take those first snaps against Florida State. He had as much as people got on him justifiably about his downfield passing last year, he still had a really productive year. And if he can take another step, he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC next year if he can continue to grow as a passer, because of everything that he offers. So I'm interested.
Are you there, Wilson?
Not sure.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah, sorry, there was a sudden advertisement for BREC Golf right here, and I'm not really sure what happened. And so we'll have to just kind of see how that shakes out, and just if Garrett Nussmeier can really push for it. I don't think it's like really a controversial spot. I don't think there's any quarterback controversy necessarily, but Garrett's going to have the chance to compete, like Brian Kelly said, because that's the way this staff approaches every single position is competition. Nobody has necessarily a secure spot, and so but Garrett's going to have to go out and prove that he needs to be on the field.
Wilson Alexander covers LSU football for The Advocate. He's our guest on Twitter at WHAlexander_. Wilson, going into spring, I wanted to do a little exercise with you real quick on each side of the ball. Let's start offense. We just did quarterback. Is there another position group on the offense that you're most excited to have questions answered about when they start spring practice?
Probably just running back, which maybe it sort of came to mind when you said it, just because there is such a cluster of guys there with John Emery and Josh Williams and Noah Kane and Armani Goodwin coming off his knee injury. You got two freshmen, one of whom is early enrolled, Trey Holly. Does somebody really, really assert themselves, or do they continue to go running back by committee? How do they end up using these guys? Because they've got some sort of variance in their skill sets. I think that because there's so much that's kind of already settled on the offensive side, running back really kind of stands out to me, and as well as maybe just who else at receiver pops up kind of around Malik Nabers. How does Aaron Anderson sort of fit into the equation, and some guys like that I think will be the interesting things to watch on the offensive side.
Same thing on defense. Position group you're most excited to watch take shape during spring?
Cornerback, for sure. There's just so much change happening there. You got only the two returning players with LaTerrence Welch and Seven Banks. So many guys brought in. 4 transfers, 3 freshmen. It's going to be fascinating to watch that competition unfold, because there's things to like about a lot of these guys and a lot of question marks about them too. As good as Denver Harris seems like he could be, he had the discipline issues at Texas A&M. He only played about half a season before he was indefinitely suspended. So how does he, kind of play in his second year in college? Deuce Chestnut coming over from Syracuse. There's a lot to like about him, and he's probably the most proven of the bunch. But can he go and take a spot from somebody like J.K. Johnson, who started 5 games at Ohio State? There's so many sort of intriguing possibilities in that cornerback room. I can't wait to watch that one unfold.
He is Wilson Alexander, covering LSU football for The Advocate. Again, on Twitter at WHAlexander_. Y'all give him a follow. Read his stuff. He does great work. Wilson, we appreciate some time on this holiday. Happy Mardi Gras, and we thank you.
Happy Mardi Gras, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.